Now to a topic few people are comfortable discussing: child sexual abuse. While people may not like talking about it, it affects many more than you might think. In Quebec, 22% of adult women and 9% of adult men say they were sexually abused as children. Surprisingly, there is very little research on the subject. But that is changing, thanks to the McGill Center for Research on Children and Families. The Center for Research on Children and Families is a relatively new center at McGill. Its mission is to act as a bridge between the research community and the social service network that deals directly with children and families in need.
Kinds of questions we ask here at the center may seem fairly simple. I'll give you an example. One of the papers that I'm working on right now is just trying to determine how many children are in foster care in Canada. That seems like a simple enough question, but in fact, no one really knows. That data is not available. And in particular, what's concerning is that we don't have good trend data to see whether there are more children in foster care or less. The trend in the United States has been for the last few years towards a decrease, which took everyone by surprise. We don't know whether the trends are going down or up in Canada.
Nico Trocmé, director of the CRCF, says people, even lawmakers, are always surprised to learn that the most basic data about children in foster care, group care, or those receiving child welfare services is just not available.
There isn't a single province right now that knows how their kids are doing at school, how kids in foster care are doing at school. Very simple questions. How many kids who are of high school age are actually in high school? How many have dropped out? What grade kids are in? Those are very, you'd think, simple questions. That's essential information if we want to play our roles as parents. When the state ends up taking up that role, we should know how kids are doing at school. Not a single province or territory right now can answer that question. We're trying to help them do that. There's roughly about 200,000 kids in Canada who come to the attention of the child welfare system every year. This is an incredible opportunity in terms of reaching out to the most high-risk kids and families in the community. We know very little about those 200,000 kids. We know very little about their needs, and we know even less about what happens once we engage them in the service delivery system.
Another example of just how neglected this field of research is, recently the Quebec government made amendments to the law limiting the amount of time a child can be kept in temporary foster care.
The problem was that no one in Quebec actually knew how often children moved. So they were trying to fix a problem for which they had really no baseline information to determine whether it actually was a problem, how much of a problem it was, and for whom it was a problem. All they had were a couple of documentaries and a couple of stories involving children who, without any doubt, had been moved around way too much, but no information on how often this happens to most children.
In 2008, the federal government and McGill University prioritized this kind of research by creating a Canada Research Chair, a CRC, in child welfare. Clinical psychologist Delphine Collin-Vézina of McGill is the first of only 2 people in Canada to receive a CRC in the field of social work.
So when Delphine came on board, it really opened up our ability to respond to those needs. Not only has Delphine taken the lead on the research we're doing in the area of child sexual abuse, but she's also been a key researcher in the area of working with First Nations communities around child mental health, adolescent mental health. So she's being able to bring her experience as a clinical psychologist and as a researcher to the team and to the center in a way that's been invaluable.
I had the opportunity to work with Nico Trocmé, who's a very renowned researcher in my field. And I was thinking of McGill as, a great institution in which I could pursue a career doing very practical, grounded research.
As part of her research, Collin-Vézina still meets with children and their families in order to understand the many ways that abuse can impact its victims.
I think that having been a psychologist and having been in touch with the people really made me more attuned to their needs. And it really reflects what is part of my research now, that I'm really looking for really clear implications and clinical implications, not only making sure that my research will bring more knowledge. For me, that is not sufficient because I've seen people suffering.
Collin-Vézina's area of expertise is a difficult one: child sexual abuse.
And I was really unsure that I wanted to pursue a career on that topic because it's uncomfortable for me too, and I've heard very awful stories that I won't be able to forget now. But that being said, when I started to work on that topic, I really became so passionate about it because you can see how much you can contribute to the society. And as a researcher and as a child psychologist, I really felt that I could do something. I could really make the world better.
But like other areas of child welfare, there is remarkably very little data on the problem of child sexual abuse. So when a study in the United States showed a dramatic drop in the number of cases, it took researchers off guard.
Starting in the 90s and until 2006, they've observed a drop in the number of cases that are investigated and substantiated by the child welfare system because of child sexual abuse. And this drop is incredible. It's 50%. Here in Canada, we don't have the exact same data, but there is one that seems to confirm this finding based on the Canadian incident studies that were conducted in 1998 and 2003 in the child welfare systems across Canada. They found a 30% drop in the number of child sexual abuse cases in the child welfare system. And everyone is really tempted to think that this drop really means a real decline.
But some researchers, like Collin-Vézina, remain skeptical that such a dramatic drop could happen in such a short period of time.
The factors that can be accountable for that are, for instance, prevention programs in the school that have been implemented in the past decades, or more incarceration or treatment of offenders. And that's true that we're doing that in Canada as they're doing that in the States. But that being said, my own interest is to see if we can also test out many other reasons that can account for that other than a real decline before to jump into conclusion and to really say that there are less victims. Because going too fast in that direction means that there will be less services for victims.
Her experience as a psychologist taught her that victims of sexual abuse usually never come forward.
It made me realize that these numbers in research showing that 90% of victims never disclose the abuse to the authorities is accurate. It's true. When we work in a clinical setting, we get to meet a lot of people who are suffering from the aftermath of child maltreatment, who's never, gone to the authorities to disclose this abuse, so they're unknown, they're invisible. And that's really one of the themes of my research program, is to better understand and to better know who are these invisible victims. I'm really interested to see if that drop can be caused by less people being willing to disclose.
She says adults who suspect a child might be a victim of abuse, or victims themselves, often worry about the repercussions of reporting the abuse, like having their names publicized in the media.
And so that could be one factor, and I'm really interested in kind of testing if that kind of factor might have played a role. But there are others, for instance, changes in practices. In the child welfare system, they don't take on all cases for investigation. When you call to say that you might wonder, they will do a brief investigation over the phone and make a decision whether they go on or not further for this investigation.
Most cases of child sexual abuse are reported by confidants of the victims, not the victims themselves. And here is where conducting research can be very challenging. How does one determine just how many people are not disclosing incidents of abuse when we know many never do and never will?
That's something that is kind of not possible from a research perspective to get to these people. So I'll go on with scenarios. So I can recruit people that have been sexually abused or not, and to kind of see what they would do with these scenarios and what What are the factors that impact on their decision? Is it the age of the child? Is it the relationship with the perpetrator? Is it the risk for that child being abused again?
The prevailing assumption is that people doubt that disclosure will result in help for the abused child.
So if people don't see any benefit of disclosing, maybe that's a major barrier, but we don't know that. That is kind of a potential reason. So I'm really interested in documenting those reasons, because I don't think that it's sufficient to just say to people, you do have to disclose. There might be some barriers to that, and if we don't know them, we won't be able to address them. And I really hope to bring that into light and make people more aware that we have to probably make the public more confident that disclosure will be beneficial for the children who are abused.
Evaluations, and this appears to be a well-conducted study. It's an evaluation of a foster parent training program, and
The McGill Centre for Research on Children and Families works with researchers across Canada to share information and increase our understanding of this tragic problem.
It's very sad to think that in addition to being sexually abused, these children are just not believed, and what kind of impact that can have.
Quebec is known for its innovative social programs, but without the necessary data, it's impossible to effectively address the needs. McGill's CRCF aims to play a leading role in filling in those blanks.
My hope is that research, such as the kind of research that Delphine is doing, looking at the decline in rates of child sexual abuse, that kind of research can on one hand inform better public policy, better clinical practice. It's also an opportunity to train and form a new generation of researchers and students through the center, and it's also a way that we can bridge the gap between the university and social service providers. So the social service providers need to see the university as a place where they can get answers to their questions.
And I'm glad that McGill gave me this opportunity and kind of made sure that this topic of child sexual abuse was going to be recognized as a major interest for McGill to be doing research on.